Introduction. Dear students, in today's topic, we are going to discuss poverty. How many of us feel saddened when we see people living in streets or family committing suicide because of lack of money to survive? Poverty is an important issue in today's world to be discussed. It means state of one's lack of certain amount of material possessions or money. It is also meant as denial of choices and opportunities, a violation of human dignity. It means lack of basic capacity to participate effectively in society. Do you know the meaning of poverty? It means not having enough to feed and clothe a family, not having a school or clinic, not having the land to grow one's food or job to earn one's living, not having access to credit. It means insecurity, powerlessness, and leaving out of individuals, households, and communities. It also means leaning to violence, and it often involves in marginal or fragile environments without access to basic needs. Poverty is pronounced lack in well-being and consists of many dimensions. It includes low incomes and the inability to acquire the basic goods and services necessarily for survival with dignity. Let us learn about two types of standards that are common in poverty. They are called absolute and relative. Absolute poverty refers to the lack of basic human needs, which includes food, water, sanitation, clothing, shelter, healthcare, and education. Relative poverty is defined in context as economic inequality in the society. If we see developing nations like India, the issue of poverty is more profound due to the lack of governmental funds. India is the second world's largest population. 35 to 40% people of its population are below poverty line. 75% of them are from rural area. According to 2010 data from the United Nations Development Programme, an estimated 29.8% of Indians live below the country's national poverty line. Causes of poverty. Now let's discuss about causes of poverty. It is difficult to separate the causes of poverty from the effects. Poverty is associated with various economic social ills. The cause of poverty in India is due to the following reasons: caste system, colonial rule, the economic policies, the dependence on agriculture, higher population growth. Caste system. Now let's learn about caste system. It means exploitation of high-ranking groups by prosperous high-ranking groups. Caste system is there in Indian society from olden days. In India, high-ranking property owners from the dominant class hold the land, who exploit the low-ranking landlords, laborers, and poor artisans economically. Dalits are considered to be poor and unemployed. Number of low-caste, scheduled tribe, and backward communities are facing discrimination for many centuries. The economic liberalization has helped just some elite and left behind the poor, particularly the lowest Hindu caste called Dalits. Scheduled caste, that is, low-ranking groups, and all other castes, that is, high-ranking groups, either do not own land or own very small land area, who are only capable of producing less than $1,000 per year of food and income per household. Colonial rule. Now let's speak about colonial rule. Indians enjoyed richness during the Hindu and Mughal period. Jawaharlal Nehru, in a statement, had said, "A significant fact which stand out is that the parts of India which have been longest under the British rule are the poorest today." The colonial privatization, regulations, tariffs, or manufactured Indian goods and taxes deindustrialized Indian economy. British policies in India made the situation worse weather conditions to lead to mass food crisis. It leads to 30 to 60 million deaths from starvation in Indian colonies. Community grain banks were forcibly closed. Land was changed from local food consumption to cotton, opium, tea, and grain for export. The economic policies of India, License Raj, helped to set up and run business in India between 1947 and 1990. The license Raj was a result of India's decision to have a planned economy where all aspects of the economy are controlled by the state and licenses were given to a select few. Corruption was main drawback in the system. India had started out in the 1950s with high growth rates, openness to trade and foreign investment, a promotional state, social expenditure, awareness and macro stability. This came to an end the 1980s with low growth rates, closure to trade and investment, a license obsessed, restrictive state license Raj, inability to maintain social expenditures and macro instability, which led to economic crisis. Let's see the rural economy in India. The level of inequality has gone up and hunger in India has reached its highest level. The rural economies across India have collapsed or on the verge of collapse due to the neoliberal policies of the government of India since the 1990s. Suicide of farmers in India from 97 to 2007 totaled close to 200,000. Debt is the main reason for these suicides. Dependence on agriculture. Majority of the population depends on agriculture in India. Floods and famine destroy the livelihood of farmers, which will lead to scarcity. This is surplus of labor in agriculture. Farmers are large vote banks and hence they can use their votes and restrict the allocation of their lands for higher income industrial projects. The services and industries have grown 2 times in number, whereas agriculture has dropped from 4.8% to 2%. At present, the farm incomes have reduced. Hunger has grown very fast. Public investment in agriculture is reduced to a greater extent. Employment has become a problem. Non-farm employment has stagnated. Millions of people started moving towards towns and cities for searching jobs. Over 85% of rural households are without lands, sub-marginal or small farmers. Nothing has happened in recent years which have changed that situation for the better. The situation has worsened much more due to various reasons. Farmers with debt committed suicide, peasant households in debt have increased in the first decade of the neoliberal economic reforms from 26% of farm households to 48.6%. Meanwhile, India kept reducing investment in agriculture. Life became miserable for small farmers. High population growth, high growth in population, or could be one of the major causes of poverty. High population growth leads to unemployment, lower economic growth, inflation and poverty. Current India's population is 1.21 billion. This is 17% of the Earth's population. India's 2011 census showed growth of 181 million people in the prior decade. During independence, India's population was only 350 million. Since independence, the population of India has increased 3 times. In 1950, India's total fertility rate was approximately 6 children per woman. Since 1952, India has worked to control its population growth. In 1983, the goal of the country's national health policy to have replacement value total fertility rate of 2.1 by the year 2000. As the total fertility rate in India remains at the higher number of 2.8, that goal was achieved. Due to huge population, economic problems have developed. This leads to unemployment, inflation, poverty and price rise. A large section of our population lives under the poverty line. Impact of poverty. Now let's see the impact of poverty. Since 1950s, the Indian government and non-governmental organizations have initiated several programs to fight poverty, including subsidized food and other necessities. These measures have helped eliminate famines, poverty levels, and reduce illiteracy and malnutrition. Black money secretly stored of foreign aid has also contributed to the slow pace of poverty alleviation in India. Indian economy has grown steadily over the last 2 decades, but its growth has been uneven when compared to social groups, economic groups, geographic regions, and rural and urban areas with significant economic progress. 25% of the nation's population earns less than the government specified poverty threshold of 32 rupees per day. The effects of the worldwide recession in 2009 have put 200 million more Indians into poverty than there were in 2004. increasing the effective poverty rate from 27.5 to 37.2. With the rapid economic growth that India is having, it is likely that a major portion of the rural population will continue to shift their living place to cities, making the issue of urban poverty more significant. The impact of poverty is most often interrelated to that one problem gives rise to another. For example, lack of proper sanitation is a major concern for India. It is easier for diseases to spread. Hunger and lack of water make people more vulnerable to them. Effect of poverty leading to increase in crime and unemployment. Inequality in wealth causes crime. Some people have high and some people have low. Crime ranks high due to poverty. Those impoverished neighborhoods or entire cities show the same problems with uneducated adults and kids that nurture more unemployment and crime, leading to chronic, long-lasting poverty. Unemployment is a bigger factor for crime than income inequality. Low income is another cause for property-related crimes like thefts and dacoits. The impact of poverty mentioned before mean that lifelong handicaps and troubles that will be passed on from generation to another. The name just a few of these hereditary plagues: no school or education, child labor, lack of basic hygiene, and spreading of disease. Unemployment and very low income affects children's education. As for those who can actually go to school, they don't see how hard work can improve their life as they see their parents fail at the task of every day. Unemployment is the reason for terrorist organizations. We note that most of the time terrorists come from poorer countries with high unemployment. Terrorist organizations often provide higher salaries than any other job do. Effect of poverty on children. The share of children affected by poverty has only got bigger and bigger. Moreover, children are not able to change which is happening to them. There isn't much they can do to help their families, nor should they have to. Usually from the age of 6, they will be enrolled in child labor. Nearly all possible effects of poverty have an impact of children's lives. Poor infrastructure, unemployment, lack of basic services, and income will give an impact on the lack of education. Malnutrition, violence at home and outside, child labor, diseases of all kinds, transmitted by the family or through the environment. The World Health Organization states that about 49% of the world's underweight children, 34% of the world's stunted children, and 46% of the world's wasted children live in India. Effect of poverty driving children to develop antisocial behavior. One of the effects of poverty on children's development is antisocial behavior that will act as a psychological protection against the children's hostile environment. Discrimination and social segregation often push them to more aggressiveness and less self-control. Due to this, they hide in reaction to stressful events. Having often been taken advantage of in their early childhood, they rarely come to a constructive way to deal with conflicts. When the children are growing up, these kinds of behaviors are more and more deep-rooted in their thinking and often considered unrecoverable. We need to take necessary action as early as possible to improve their living conditions. Policymakers should not think only about income, but a child's social environment also: parenting, school violence, housing, but also sanitation, uncontaminated food and water play a big role in creating new effects of poverty. Effect of poverty on women. Now let's discuss about effect of poverty on women. Everywhere in the world, women have very limited access to education for political, religious or social reasons and are sometimes forbidden to work. Gender discrimination and wage discrimination have only added misery. It's always recommended that when fighting against poverty to start with empowering women in every possible way to solve a great deal of problems. Single-parent families have made things worse. Women have become more and more helpless to their environment. They find themselves forced to feed the poverty cycle by living in poverty with their children. Women can have a great impact not only on the household income but also on the education of children and avoiding early child deaths due to bad habits, sanitation or improper food or water. Effect of poverty on health. Effect of poverty on health. A simple measure of poverty is in looking at different populations' health and life anticipation. Poorer communities fare worse than rich people. But people's health is affected not only by material poverty, it is getting affected by social elimination, mental health, but the result is the same. On average, the poor people live shorter than the rich people. It is noted that poverty is often the basic cause of malnutrition in children. Malnutrition often becomes reason for diseases like diarrhea, malaria, and measles due to the lack of healthcare access, which are also linked to the problem of poverty. The United Nations had estimated that 2.1 million Indian children die before they reach 5 years every year, 4 children every minute. Malnutrition is still a problem for India. Micronutrients deficiencies alone may cost India US $2.5 billion annually. Malnutrition can lead to children affecting their school education or perform to their fullest potential. This will lead to a decrease in labor productivity, affecting India's economic growth as a whole. Lack of proper sanitation is reason for new diseases. People under poverty line lack this basic facility and suffer continued health problems. Other effect of poverty. Now we will discuss about other effects of poverty. Alcohol and substance abuse taken from kids become a very common self-destructive habit to cope with huge amounts of stress leading to misery. Crippling accidents due to insecure working environments, machinery in factories or agriculture, as well as other work hazards such as lead poisoning, pesticide poisoning, bites from wild animals due to lack of proper protection. Poor housing also leads to long-lasting cause of diseases, water and food-related diseases, simply because the poor always afford safe foods. Do you know what constitutes the major cause of poverty? It is illiteracy. It is really very painful that after more than 60 years of independence, about 1/4 of our population are still illiterate. They do not know how to read. Right, illiteracy is one of the constraints which deprive one from opportunities to seek other forms of livelihood. Efforts to reduce poverty. A nation-building effort should shift from nationalism to uniting people around a society that represent and act according to a common set of values. In particular, it should be a society that nurtures an environment that will enable all of its citizens to best use of develop new skills, to best express their potential and participate in the development of the society. If we need to eradicate poverty from India, it is only a long-term goal. Poverty alleviation is to make better progress in the coming years, that is, in the next 50 years than in the past, as a trickle-down effect of the growing middle class. Increasing stress on education, reservation in government jobs, and the increasing empowerment of women and the financially weaker sections of society are also expected to contribute to increase the poverty. It is incorrect to say that all poverty education programs have failed. The growth of the middle class, which was virtually non-existent when India became a free nation in August 1947, indicates that economic prosperity has indeed been very impressive in India, but the distribution of wealth is not at all even. Since the early 1950s, government has initiated, sustained and refined various schemes to help the poor to have self-sufficient in food production. The most important initiative has been the supply of basic commodities, particularly food, at cheap prices, available throughout the country, as the poor spend about 80% of their income on food. The schemes have, however, not been very successful because the rate of poverty reduction lags behind the rapid population growth rate. Government policies are encouraging the farmers to switch to cash crops instead of traditional food crops, which has resulted in an extraordinary increase in farm input costs. While market forces determine the price of the cash crop, a disproportionately large number of affected farm suicide have occurred with cash crops, because with food crops such as rice, even if the price falls, there is food left to survive on. The Indian government started the Integrated Childhood Development Service (CDS) in 1975 to fight malnutrition. ICDS is the world's largest child development program, but its effects are very less. The program failed to focus on children under 3. The group should receive the most help from the ICDS. Most growth retardation would develop during the age of 2 and are mostly irreversible. With the lack of help, the chances that newborn babies are unable to develop fully would be higher. Conclusion. So, you have learned a lot about poverty. Poverty is a very dangerous in the entire country. In the end, poverty is a major cause of social tension and threatens to divide a nation because of the issue of inequalities, in particular income inequality. This happens when wealth in a country is poorly distributed among its citizens. Indian government has vigorously started agricultural land ceiling law. It prohibits anyone from owning land greater than mandated limits. India has used this law to forcibly acquire land from some and then redistribute them for millions of acres to the landless and poor of the low caste. In some states, these laws have not met the expectations. Economic exploitation and consequent land redistribution within India between 1950 and 1990 had no effect on the quality of life and poverty reduction. Instead, economic reforms since 1990s and resultant opportunities for non-agricultural jobs have reduced poverty and increased per capita income for all segments of Indian society. It's sort of an unforeseen effect of poverty on people's minds or mental resistance to change. Stabilizing and empowering political institutions is therefore important for fighting against the consequence of poverty. It is time now that we stand together and take action to eliminate poverty.